What are they really saying? Helping students read between the lines and making inferences. And we were actually just talking about a student that Danielle had been working with for years and years who finally passed their, I think you said their high set, maybe their GED, but this was something that really gave them trouble. So I know it is something that gives students a lot of trouble understanding inferences. So Kara's going to help us out with that today. Um, while you're here, if you'll use the chat feature to introduce yourselves, let's see if that can help. Hopefully that's better. Rare that people say they can hardly hear me. Um, use the chat to introduce yourself, share links and resources with the group. It is where Danielle will be posting links that get mentioned throughout the webinar. We're going to ask that if you have questions for Kara, to use the Q&A feature to put those questions in there. That just helps us track the questions and make sure every question gets answered. Kara, if you'll go to the next one. We are recording this webinar, so in a couple of days, you'll get a follow-up email with links to the webinar recording and Kara's slideshow. You're also going to get a summary sheet with kind of the main points from Kara's presentation, transcripts of the chat and the Q&A, a certificate for attending, and you'll get some scholarship and individual membership information. Talk a little bit about that in just a minute. You're also going to get a separate email with some dates listed for small group coaching sessions. What are those small group coaching sessions? So we've been doing this for a while, and the small group coaching sessions are really an opportunity for you to sign up, talk further with Kara about making inferences, and really get some targeted advice, guidance, suggestions for how to implement the strategies she's talking about today in with your classroom. So uh, you'll see a schedule in the email that comes up. You register ahead of time, up to 12 participants per session. And everybody really just gets a chance to go around and ask a question of Kara. Hey, I was trying to do this with my students. Here's what was happening. I didn't know what to do. And you'll get some advice from Kara and you'll get some advice from other people attending that coaching session. We'll move on to the next one. There we go. Some additional resources for you folks. Scholarships, we have material scholarships of $1,000. So you'll apply by clicking on the link in the follow-up email. But what those are designed to do is just as we go through these webinars, Kara or other presenters might mention resources. Danielle might post some. You might hear some participants recommend some resources in the chat. So if they're published by New Readers Press, it's an opportunity. You can apply for a $1,000 scholarship. It's like $900 worth of materials plus shipping and handling, and purchase some of those materials and try them out. And I believe we're limited to 60 altogether. I think we've given out about 2/3 of that. So if you are interested in testing out some new materials, don't wait around too long. The money will be gone. Also, we're giving everybody free individual memberships to Pro Literacy. Again, there'll be a link for you to fill that out. Deadline to apply is May 10th. And the benefit of that individual membership, aside from being kind of all the great just general membership benefits, is there are specific resources on Education Network that you might find valuable that will be connected to this topic and other topics from the Teacher Training Plus webinar series. So lesson plans and things like that that are part of our notebook that goes out free to members. So this will allow you to access those resources. All right, next. And speaking of resources, we have a great resource for you this year. It's an election 2024 interactive voting guide for adult learners. So Those of you who are familiar with News for You, you know that every election year they publish a voting guide. This is an online course. It's kind of an expansion of that. It's very interactive, lots of good resources in there. It um, kind of describes the electoral process, also tells you how to register to vote, gives you some links to find out where to register to vote in your state. So I would encourage you guys to check that out. There's a link there for you, and that'll be in the slides uh, when you get them in the follow-up email. Okay, I think that's it for me. I'm going to turn things over to Kara. Kara's going to introduce herself and enjoy the webinar.
All right. Hello, everyone. So I have turned off my camera just so that we can really focus on the material, but here's a picture of my face just in case you didn't get to catch it at the beginning as everybody was coming in. So my name is Krawiec. I am presenting today, and I have been in the adult education field for the last about 7 years or so, but I have just a couple of things that I would like to kind of say as we're getting into all of this. So first and foremost, thank you, Todd, for that introduction, and Danielle, and Robin, and Maribel, and Lauren, and the whole Pro Literacy team, and of course Dollar General for helping fund this program. This is my second year participating, and it has been absolutely wonderful. So for those of you who have attended my presentations in the past, I've seen a couple of you in the chat already. Thank you so much for coming back. It's so nice to see some of those familiar names, and hopefully I'll get to see your smiling faces during those coaching sessions. So as Todd mentioned, please sign up for those. That is such a wonderful opportunity for us to get to follow up on the conversations that we're having here today, because as I like to stress during all of my presentations, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of our conversation, but I'd love it to continue. I want to have a dialogue with all of you. It's not just me up here presenting all this information. I do ask for participation, and that participation often extends beyond just today. So if it's your first time, welcome. I'm looking forward to getting started. And just so that you can all see here, this is my bio. One of the things I did want to note, though, is most recently I was promoted to Director of Student Success at Seeds of Literacy, and we are now focusing on helping our students with what's that step after they achieve their educational goals with us. So whether that be college or career, it's just something I'm starting to explore. So I'd love to talk more of you about that, maybe during coaching sessions, if you have any resources I just want to connect to about that. So thank you. But we're gonna continue on because we have a lot to get through today. And thanks, Monica, I see it in the chat. All right, so if you all right away will start participating for me, I'd really appreciate it. If you can put in the chat, what do you think is happening in this picture? So I just want to dive right in. Tell me, what do you think is happening in this picture? All right, so I see saying goodbye. What else do we think is happening? The child is hurt and ran over for some emotional support. Telling dad, leaving for school. Excellent, yeah. Little girl is upset, having anxiety, doesn't want to leave. Yeah, needing to be consoled from her big brother. Good. Unexpected event, seeking comfort, something upset. Yeah, see a backpack. Good. Exactly, right? We see so many different things just based on this one picture. So what I want you to think about now is what clues make you think this. So some people have already included some of this in the chat, but just think about what are those clues that are making you think that's what you're seeing here on the screen. Yeah, and I like that someone said little girl hugging someone who doesn't seem to know what to do. What makes you think that? Good, he seems surprised. Yeah. He's crying, tears in her eyes. Yes. Yes, his arms are open rather than closed around her. You guys are noticing so many things. Excellent. This is perfect. Okay, the girl looks sad. Yes, wonderful. Wow, thank you all for participating so much. Now, what would happen if I told you that The title of this piece is The Drop-Off. How does that change your understanding of what's happening in this picture? So the title of this piece is The Drop-Off. How does that change it? She doesn't like school, dropping her off at school. Yeah, she doesn't want to go. First day of school, has to leave her dad, right? So, separation anxiety. Oh, yes. So it may be one or all of these things, right? But what I wanted to do with this exercise, and I appreciate you all just diving in so much, is that there are layers of inferences that we're making right now based on what we're seeing. So one of the things that we want to stress to students is that we make inferences every single day. We're making inferences visually in conversations, not just in reading text. So I actually found this website online. I'll make sure that I include it later so that you guys can take a peek. It is originally intended for a K through 12 classroom. However, I think that the idea behind it is really just so wonderful and valid. It's using images to help get conversations started about different skill building. So as we see here then, there are so many different factors that influence then the way that we interpreted and understood and then made inferences based on what was here in front of us. So a lot of you noted the body language, the tears, the backpack, right? And then it was interesting how once we found out the title, we were able to kind of think, okay, it might be a family member, brother, dad, right? So all of this comes as we pull back more and more of those layers. It's the same with making inferences. So especially if students are struggling to make those inferences, start talking about how inferences happen every single day. And we'll talk more about it, but I think using visuals is a great way to show students that we are making inferences all the time, maybe without even realizing it. And the other thing too that I kind of love about this picture is even like the gray of the background then influences kind of the mood and the tone. So we see all of this just through this visual. So thanks all for participating. We just made an inference. All right. So today then, we will have a couple of clear objectives, things that I would like to make sure we get through. And one of the things I tell everyone as you come into my presentation is I always title them after things that are students often ask me. So often I hear, what is the author really saying? So when we are asked to make inferences, so often we have to think about, okay, what's going on then beneath the surface? So the first thing we're going to talk about today is how to explain to students the nuances between literal and inferential comprehension. So as I just mentioned, there were all of those layers to interpreting that picture. That's because there's all different layers of comprehension. Then I want to talk about how we can help students practice making inferences at all stages of the reading process. So we're going to kind of quickly talk about the reading process and how to integrate good inference skill building at all of those stages. And then finally, at the very end, I'm going to actually model how to help students make inferences, and actually I'm going to use a text that we'll read together, and I'll kind of model how to walk a student through making those inference-based questions for the HSE, whether that GED or HiSET. And then bonus, if you come to the coaching sessions, which I hope you will, I would want you then to practice modeling how to navigate inference-based questions. So I might throw a little exercise into our coaching sessions as well, so that we can put into practice everything we've learned here today. So just want to stress again, come to the coaching sessions, come to the coaching sessions. They're so wonderful. So please, would love that. All right. So Danielle, if you wouldn't mind launching the first poll, please. I just want to know, how comfortable do you feel explaining to students how to differentiate between literal and inferential comprehension? So do you feel comfortable explaining it to students? So what's the difference? see a lot of the answers coming through. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate your participation. Again, I'm always going to say thank you. Okay, so we've got 78 here, but I've got 97 participants. So let's see if we can get a couple more. Anybody else? Don't worry, it's just a poll. I just want to know. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for participating in that. And I see that kind of the majority are falling into that somewhat comfortable. So here I'm going to share the results. All right, so as we can see here, majority kind of fall into that somewhat comfortable. Some people are very comfortable, some people are a little comfortable. So hopefully by the end of today and with the coaching session, if you're able to join, I would love to get you all feeling into that next level of whatever you chose. Although if you're in that very comfortable, I'm gonna lean on you a little bit today to help others as well as we move through this process. Okay, well, thank you all so much. All right, so we're gonna end that poll. All right. As I mentioned, the first way to really talk to students about inferences is to make sure they understand the difference between literal and inferential comprehension. It can be a very difficult thing to explain, but there are some key words that will really help students understand exactly what we mean by this difference, and also then things you can build on. So with literal comprehension, it is understanding what is explicitly stated in the passage. So often then we use that who, what, when, where kind of questioning, right? All of those reporter questions, because it's just what is specifically present in the passage. So that word explicit is very important to note to students, because it means then that you can find it. You can find it in the passage, hopefully word for word, but have it stated right there for you. And literal comprehension ensures then that we have a foundational level of understanding. So as I mentioned, comprehension kind of happens in layers. We have to have a literal comprehension of a piece before we can dig into the inferential comprehension. And then also, the other word when we're talking about literal comprehension, we want to think about the denotation of words. So what do words mean? If we were to look them up in a dictionary, what would they mean in that moment? So those are some of the ways we kind of talk about literal comprehension, whereas inferential comprehension, that is understanding what is implicitly stated in the passage. So here that key word is implicit. So that means it is not directly stated, but implied. So once we have that literal comprehension, then we can move into more of an inferential comprehension, which really is a much deeper dive that requires more critical thinking and analysis. So some of those words and questions that we might be looking for are why and how. Those push students then to think about what's beyond just in the passage. What might be beyond that? What's being implied? So actually I gave a presentation last year on critical thinking skills, and I really focused on the importance of asking questions and asking why and how. So that's one of the best ways we can kind of push students into that next level of comprehension. And then the other word we kind of want to think about is connotation. So connotation then is words tone and impact. These are all things we can share with students, because if we're looking specifically at a vocabulary word and a student isn't sure what they're sure what the denotation is, so what the dictionary says, but it's being used in a way that may be slightly different from that dictionary definition, we want to explain that all words have different connotations too. They might be used in slightly different ways. Also, as I was preparing for this presentation, I was thinking about some of the ways that I explain making inferences to students, and especially if it may be difficult for students to kind of grasp that difference between the literal and inferential comprehension. One example I like to give is, okay, I'm inviting you to a party. And I say to you, hey, I'd really love if you could come to my party. You don't have to, but if you'd like to come, you can come. Now, what I'll ask students then is, do I want you to come to the party? All right, so if you guys want to put in the chat, that'd be cool. Do I want you to come to this party based on how I threw out the invitation? Yeah, see you soon. Yeah, come to my party. All right, guys, later we'll have the party at the coaching sessions. How about that? Yes, okay. So what gave it away? So what gave it away that, yes, I would like you to come to my party? I really want you to come. I'd like it if you could come. I really want you to come. Yes, and today's my birthday. Christine, is it your birthday? How you invited the person. Good. So maybe the tone. Oh, thank you, Tom, for pointing out you don't have to. How I stress that word have. So it is the tone, the excitement, all of those things we can infer then based on the way I said it, right? And so that happens all the time in conversations, but that also happens in text. It may be a little bit more difficult to see that, but it's always there. It's in the author's purpose. It's in the sentence structure. It's in the tone, in the word choice, all of these things that we can examine to help you see that. Yeah. Oh, thank you for pointing that out. The but. Yeah. It does leave room for that. So thank you. And it can be very difficult. The thing too I want to stress is that yes, we make inferences every day. However, it doesn't mean that these are always easy. So trying to help students develop the skills in multiple areas, not just when reading text, allows us then to really build those critical thinking skills that are needed so far beyond the classroom. So thank you for pointing that out. Yes, so there are multiple ways then that we can help students start making inferences at every stage of the reading process. So although it may be frustrating, if they start building these strong reading habits and making inferences before they even start reading, they'll be able to hopefully build stronger reading habits and help them prepare for those kinds of critical thinking inference questions that'll be on the HSE exam. So before even reading, some of the things we can do to help students feel more comfortable with making inferences is become familiar with Socratic questioning. So this is something that is so crucial because you want to make sure that students are comfortable with having a questioning system. So it's not something where they have to then always have an answer for something, but instead be able just to explore, ask questions. So much of reading is in the exploration. That's what makes it so exciting. So we want to encourage students to understand that there's a questioning, there's a process to this. And the more questions you ask, just the better understanding you'll have of the text. So just becoming familiar with that idea of Socratic questioning. And then, of course, previewing the text. One of the most important things I stress to my students as they're getting ready for an HSE exam is to make sure they look at the footnote. So in those passages that are provided, there's that footnote with the excerpt information. Often there's a title, a date, and the author. Now, even if you are unfamiliar with some of those pieces, like you may not know the author, but if you have a date, then we might be able to infer some more information. Or if you have the title, as we saw earlier, we'll be able to see then that it can influence our understanding of the piece because it sheds just a little bit more light. And then, of course, Cheryl, you were one step ahead of me. I love it. Make predictions. So what predictions can be made based on what you're seeing, especially as you're quickly scanning the text? So this is something then that asking students, again, to think about what may happen, or why is this happening, or why would the author be writing it? Absolutely I'm quoting you here, Cheryl, sets a reason for reading. It gives kind of that, okay, here's the stage. Let's think about why this is happening. I love the way you phrase that. So yes, encourage students to make those predictions. And then what you already know about this topic. So when we think about this, we want to think about, okay, making inferences. When we were looking at that visual example, without maybe even realizing it, a lot of us were pulling from our own backgrounds, our own knowledge about what this may be about, what the picture may be showing us. And that's just because we all bring that background knowledge and background experience. So helping students understand that they may or may not already know something about a topic, but if they do, then they can bring that background knowledge to it. And if they're uncertain about the topic, again, looking for some of those other clues that may give them a heads up or something to look for then as they're moving through the reading process. All right, and then during reading. So as we all know, you need to be actively engaged while you're reading. But here, I'm even going to push you to say be proactively engaged. Not just because I like alliteration, which I do. So my last one was prepare. This is proactively engage. And next one is practice. But beyond that, if you are proactively engaged, that means then that you are in a position where you are ready to take on the text and you are immersing yourself in the entire experience, seeing it as something that you don't just passively kind of read through, but it's something that needs to be a full immersion into an understanding of it. It also makes it a little bit more fun because if you only look at the surface, you'll only find the literal comprehension. But it's crucial, of course, to have that literal comprehension, but then you've got to encourage students to move past that. So one of the things we can do, and I was just talking to a student about this today, is use the chunking method just to ensure that literal comprehension. So one of the first things we want to do is make sure that we have that base level, because without that base level, we're not going to be able to move forward with that deeper analysis. So chunking the information, and that's where you literally take a couple paragraphs at a time, and then you ask yourself when you stop, okay, what was that about? What do I know about this? Ask those kind of reporter questions, who, what, when, where, just to make sure that understanding comes first. But then we want to dig in. And this is where that questioning becomes so important. Encourage students to write down questions while they're reading. What confused you? What excited you? What was interesting? What do you think about this? And again, that Socratic questioning process really allows that full engagement. So we want to make sure then that we are encouraging these kinds of behaviors before taking the test, right? So this is a whole process that we want to help students with as they're preparing. But think about it like an adventure. You guys may be able to tell, I really love reading. I hope it comes through in my voice and in my enthusiasm for this topic, but that's something we can share with our students. And it's by encouraging them to ask those questions, to think about why these things are happening. And then, of course, note any unfamiliar vocabulary words that may have different connotations. So this is something that can be so helpful for students because, again, you may have the denotation definition in your head, but then the connotation, the way words feel and how we move in them, like that all is so crucial to understand because it may change the meaning. All right. How we doing, everybody? Awesome. And then, of course, after reading. So once we are done reading, the first thing I would encourage students to do is to summarize the passage first. So again, ensure that literal comprehension. We want to make sure that students have that base level first, because without a literal comprehension, we won't be able to dig deeper. I kind of think about it like an onion. We got to keep peeling back the layers. So let's ensure that literal comprehension first. And then once we know students have that, we can prompt them to offer an opinion. So often students, and regardless of age, but adult students are worried about offering their opinion because they don't want to be wrong. I mean, nobody really wants to be wrong, right? But the beautiful thing about literature is that you can interpret it. You can have an opinion. So asking students, what do you think about this? What would you have done instead? Why did the author do this? Would you have done that? This gives students the freedom to then have an opinion about this, which offers then a whole new space of safe and supportive sharing, and really opens that opportunity for discussion. And then ask students that don't have definitively right questions. This is one of my favorite things to do. I often ask questions that I don't have an answer to. And this is because I'm genuinely curious. I want to know what other people think. And often I don't know too, and I would like to know. So asking students questions that don't have definitively right answers or that you don't have an answer to helps encourage them to see, okay, we can figure this out together. There isn't always just a right or a wrong with reading. Because one of the cool things is you can argue anything as long as you find support in the text. Yes, this is so important to stress to students. So we have to remind them, you have to find the support in the text. However, one of the lovely things about reading is that, yes, you can interpret it. There are multiple ways to view what we're reading. And often then it's just about finding, okay, what made me think this? Why do I think this? And it kind of gets students thinking about that whole process then. Again, reading is a process that you have to actively engage in, proactively engage in, and help them see that there's a discovery to all of this. What I really love too is if you're using this in a classroom, you can even provide a physical space to have these kinds of conversations. So as I was going through this presentation with Todd and Danielle the other day, we were kind of talking about creating a literal circle. So in the classroom, you can actually create a circle where students can be really at the center of the conversation. And as the instructor, you can then be on the periphery where you are able to help support, but your voice is not the dominant voice in the room. And then you can ask students to go around the circle and maybe offer an opinion. So I think this because, always that because. Ask students to give you a because. I tell students all the time, you can tell me you didn't like it. That is fine, but why? And I want specifics. So if you don't like something, that is absolutely fine. But again, support it. Support anything that you're going to say. But then as you're asking students for their opinions, you can go around the circle and the next person can say, I agree with so-and-so because, and they have to support that, and then add to it by saying, and I think this. So this actually creates a physical space in the classroom then where students' voices can be heard. And again, it's not necessarily just about getting the right or wrong answer. It's about reading as that process of discovery, as that process of really digging into it, making it an open space, somewhere where students feel comfortable to share. And then sometimes, you know what, students may be a little off base, and you know that happens to the best of us. But then again, go back to that first part, ensure the literal comprehension. So if a student is trying to argue something and you're like, oh, I really don't know where I see that in the passage, ask them to go back to that first step and say, okay, wait, summarize this for me. What paragraph did you see that in? Let's go back to it real quick. Let's reread, let's summarize. And that way then it gives you an opportunity to help review and ensure that first layer of comprehension before going forward. All right, are you guys ready for an activity? I'm ready. Okay. So Danielle, if you don't mind putting in the chat, I have put up a passage onto the screen for us. If you are having trouble seeing it though, Danielle's gonna put the link in the chat so that you can open it on your computer if you'd like and maybe zoom in. I'm actually gonna read this out loud for us so that what I want you guys to do though is really follow along. I'm going to model my process. So how I would approach this passage. I actually wrote down what I was thinking while I was reading, so I'm going to share it with you guys. And because what we want to encourage students to do is to come up with their own process, but what better way to do that than to see how others would approach this, right? Okay, so are we ready? Are we ready? All right, so I'm going to read this, and as I'm reading, I'm going to stop and kind of show you how I would approach this. What would be my method? How do I do it when I'm on my own or when I'm working with students? So the first thing we want to do is that preview very quickly. So up at the top, Speech Accepting the Nobel Prize in Literature by William Faulkner, 1950. Okay. So we want to think about the title. It's accepting the Nobel Prize in Literature. That's pretty important. This must have been a very big speech, right? Even if we don't know who William Faulkner is, we know that he was a writer. And selfishly, I know a lot about this topic because I have my master's in 20th century American Lit, so I apologize. But even if you don't know who the author is, the date is going to give us a really good clue. So as William Faulkner won the Nobel Prize in 1949 and gave this speech then in 1950. So we want to think about then, okay, what was happening in the 1950s? So World War II had ended a couple of years previous. So we want to think about how the world was kind of shifting around, and also just thinking about, okay, what was America's place in this? What kind of impact would a Nobel Prize during this time have had on the overall world? So he's presenting not just to other Americans, but the overall world. Okay, so here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel that this award was not made to me as a man, but to my work, a life's work in the agony and sweat of the human spirit, not for glory and least of all for profit, but to create out of the materials of the human spirit something which did not exist before. So this award is only mine in trust. It will not be difficult, to find a dedication for the money part of it commensurate with the purpose and significance of its origins. But I would like to do the same with the acclaim too, by using this moment as a pinnacle from which I might be listened to by the young men and women already dedicated to the same anguish and travail, among whom is already that one who will someday stand here where I am standing. Ooh, okay. So as I'm looking at this already, I'm noting I got a couple words in here that would immediately kind of stand out to me. So commensurate, that's one of the first ones that I would see. We've also got pinnacle, right? So thinking about, okay, what do these words mean? How do they mean it, or what do they mean in this context? Also, who is he talking to? So he's talking to other writers, but specifically young men and young women. So people who are coming up into this field, right? And who may want to be writers. The other thing I noticed as well, he says human spirit twice, almost back to back. I wonder why that's important. We should probably pay attention to that as we move forward. Okay, so let's see. Our tragedy today is a general and universal physical fear, so long sustained by now that we can even bear it. There are no longer problems of the spirit. Spirit again. There's only the question, when will I be blown up? Well, okay. So we'll circle back to that. That would be an instance where I would definitely circle that. Because of this, the young man or woman writing today has forgotten the problems of the human heart in conflict with itself, which alone can make good writing, because only that is worth writing about, worth the agony and the sweat. Okay, so hold on. I wanted to circle back to that question. When will I be blown up? What is he talking about? So this is where then knowing that date, 1950, becomes very important, because at the end of World War II, what's happened? We've used the atom bomb for the first time. And then, of course, the Cold War is now coming, and all of this is happening where the pressure of using atomic weapons is now a reality. And so he's saying here then, what else is there to question, right? But will I be blown up? When will I be blown up? And so because of this, we have forgotten the problems of the human heart in conflict with itself. But he's saying that's the only thing that good writing is, right? It's worth the agony, it's worth the sweat, right? Interesting. Okay, let's see what's next. So he must learn them again. He must teach himself that the basis of all things is to be afraid. And teaching himself that, forget it forever, leaving no room in his workshop for anything but the old rarities and truths of the heart, the universal truths, lacking which any story is ephemeral and doomed. Love and honor and pity and pride and compassion and sacrifice. Until he does so, he labors under a curse. He writes not of love, but of lust, of defeats in which nobody loses anything of value, or victories without hope, and worst of all, without pity or compassion. His griefs grieve on no universal bones, leaving no scars. He writes not of the heart, but of the glands. Whew. Oh my God. Okay, so actually, I just want to point out in my notes, I just put whoa at the end of this. So, what we want to think about then is what is he saying here? So, again, we've got some words. So, I'm going to think about that word ephemeral, right? So, he's saying that the universal truths need to be at the forefront. But if a story lacks those, then the story is ephemeral or doomed. And what it really needs is love and honor and pity and pride and compassion and sacrifice. Just that listing right there is so poignant, right? To see all of that. All right. Let's keep going. So until he learns these things, he will write as though he stood among and watched the end of man. I decline to accept the end of man. It is easy enough to say that man is immortal simply because he will endure. That is when the last ding-dong of doom has clanged and faded from the last worthless rock hanging tideless in the last red and dying evening, that even then there will still be one more sound, that of his puny, inexhaustible voice, still talking. Oh my God, is this a writer or what? So what we can think about then is how he has created this picture in our mind, right? That he is declining to accept the end of man. And I apologize, but because I kind of have this background, I also typically encourage students to think about how that idea of the inexhaustible voice, what he means by that, and this idea of endurance. So what it means for man to endure. And it's not just his voice, it's not just his language. Because, as we see in the last paragraph, I refuse to accept this. I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He is immortal, not because he alone among creatures has an inexhaustible voice, but because he has a soul, a spirit capable of compassion and sacrifice and endurance. The poet's, the writer's duty is to write about these things. It is his privilege to help man endure by lifting his heart, by reminding him of the courage and honor and hope and pride and compassion and pity and sacrifice which have been the glory of his past. The poet's voice need not merely be the record of man, it can be one of the props, the pillars, to help him endure and prevail. Whew, okay, yeah. So I don't know about how you guys feel at the end of this speech, but oh my goodness. And especially that part, in reading it aloud, the courage and honor and hope and pride and compassion, all of that really creates this strong feeling, right, of just this is what our soul needs to survive, that idea of the spirit. So what I was wondering is, again, how many times is spirit mentioned in this passage? Does anybody know? Has anybody else looked for it? Or can quickly count? If you want to put it in the chat. You just get bonus points. You don't. I have no prizes. But if somebody knows, put it in the chat. Okay. However, at the end of this then, what I really want to think about then is, what is he saying? What is he saying to these young men and women? What is he encouraging them to do? What is he saying about the writer's duty? So spirit 4 times. Yeah, Monica. Okay. I'm so glad somebody counted. Because I was thinking about this as I started reading. I'm like, man, within that first like sentence, it's spirit twice. But then as you read on, it's even more. So yeah, we want to think about what is he saying about writing? What is he saying about the purpose of writing? And then what is he encouraging to young men and women as they embark on this? Because they will be the ones, like he's saying, that will someday stand here where I'm standing. Okay, so Danielle, can you put a couple inference questions up for everybody to try? And along with the sacrifice. Yes, thank you, thank you. But Danielle, yes, please put the questions up. And then we'll go over them. So I want you guys to try to answer these inference questions, and then we'll talk through them. And take your time. All right, I'm gonna give everybody about 1 minute. There. Ah, you guys are wonderful. Okay, we'll give it just another 10 seconds or so. All right, I'm gonna end the poll. Thank you guys so much. All right, we are going to share the results. Okay, so we see here then for the first question, the majority of people picked D, right? So writers are not focusing on human emotions. For number 2, and I will tell you then what is the correct answer in just a second. But number 2 then, what does the author imply about mankind? So here then we see the majority picked man's spirit gives the ability to transcend. And then our last question is, what is the most logical inference to make about how Faulkner views poets and writers? He sees them as, so this one we are a little bit more split on, which I'm excited about because I want to explain why. But yeah, so we see so messengers of human emotions are about 44%, and then essential to the structure of society is about 54%. Interesting. So here, let's find out then what's correct. All right. So for question number 1 then, D is correct. So writers are not focusing on human emotions. And again, the majority of people picked D. Um, but here then it's interesting because it's asking which is the best inference to make about this statement. So one of the things that you want to stress to students as you're working on these inference questions is that often it's what is most correct, which can be really frustrating because that often means there's more than one correct answer, which is, as we've talked about, usually true when reading. The second question then, what does the author imply about mankind? So the majority picked A, which is man's spirit gives the ability to transcend. Excellent. And then with the last question, I'm glad that it was a little bit split because it is B, so it's essential to the structure of society. However, I see why A would also make sense. And again, it's what's the most logical inference. So we have to, again, pick both A and B. And I will tell students this when we work on this. Both A and B are correct. However, they are asking for what is the most logical. So here then we see it can be kind of split. And it's because of that very last sentence when he's talking about writers being the pillars of society, right? So they are essential to the structure. Yes, and I'd like to point out, so I did take this from the Steck Von Reasoning Through Language Arts workbook. So that's why these questions look so closely matched to what you would actually see on the GED. I didn't write them myself. I won't take credit for that. However, I do think they are really good examples of what kind of inference questions students are facing and why they are so difficult. Because again, it's that idea that it's the most logical inference or what would be the best inference. Because with inferences, again, it's that deeper layer of analysis, it's that deeper layer of comprehension that is a little bit more nuanced. There is some difficulty behind that that is not just straight on the page where we can, okay, say, I saw it here in this sentence, let me verbatim take it from there. Absolutely not. That's not what inferences are. They take a little bit more time. So as I was modeling with you guys, one of the best things we can do for students is just show them that kind of process of what does it look like to question? What does it look like to chunk information? How do we pull all this together? If anybody wants to talk more specifically about this example or just more examples of good passages for inference questions, let's do that during a coaching session. So that's my plug for that. I don't want to dig too deep into it. And also, we are running close to the end of our time. So I want to make sure then that we get through the rest. So here then, just want to point out the upcoming webinars. So the other tracks are offering their last sessions for this series. And if you are interested, please, please, please take advantage. There have been some wonderful sessions. I would recommend looking over past recordings of them. They're all available on the Pro Literacy YouTube page, but also you can access them through just proliteracy.org. And then here's the webinar survey. Please take a quick moment before we dive into the Q&A. Just scan it on your phone, and if you have a second to take the survey, I would really appreciate that. The feedback is very helpful. And then, of course, here are the coaching sessions. Sign up for a coaching session. Come talk to me more. Unfortunately, an hour is not enough time to really dig into this topic. I was, right before the presentation, I was lamenting to the Pro Literacy team how this is something I could talk forever on. And really, it's such a nuanced topic that being able to talk specifically about certain students or situations or passages, ways to kind of build it, we can get into all of that in the coaching sessions. All right, now, any questions? So here I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn my camera on so that you can see me again. Hello. So yeah, if we would like to find out what questions are in the Q&A, yeah.
Yeah, so Kara, you've got a couple of questions in the Q&A. A couple of people would like you to say your source again for that last inferencing passage. I think you said it was Steckbon, but
Yes, so it is the Steckfon Reasoning Through Language Arts workbook, which I do have it cited on the last page of my slide. So I have a works cited page. So if anybody wants to access that, you will have the works cited there for you.
sounds good.
Yeah, and it'll also include the website where I found the first exercise, the image. So that's called Once Upon a Picture. So yeah.
And then we also have a question. Someone would like to know when what your sequence is. When do you introduce inferencing? They said when teaching facts, sequence, context, main idea, conclusion, and inference, at what point do you introduce inference?
As early as possible, because again, there's ways to build in making inferences without having to say, okay, and now we're making inferences. So even with teaching students skills like previewing the text, there's ways to start kind of building in some of that introductory material for inferences, because it is a skill that needs to be practiced. It takes time to develop, and just the more comfortable, especially with like questioning. So getting comfortable with Socratic questioning, I would start that first day of class. I would just talk to students about what that means, talk to students about when we read, we want to dig into those questions. Yeah, I hope that answers it.
Thank you.
But also that literal comprehension is so important to get first. So if students are really struggling just with answering that who, what, when, where, we want to make sure that we discuss main idea and like details than before digging into too much inference.
And as long as we've got a couple of questions, I think there was a question early on, and I think you did already kind of answer to address it while you were presenting. But there was someone who wanted to know, let me just go back here and look. If you could go over again how to address students who are hesitant to, be wrong or hesitant or have been taught that making assumptions is not a good thing. So if you want to speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is such a difficult thing to overcome because nobody wants to be wrong, especially if you're in a larger classroom setting. But one of the things you can help do is encourage that like safe and supportive learning community, but also by acknowledging, even as the instructor, that, hey, I don't have all the answers. I always tell students like, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know, and that's why I'm asking you. Because it really just acknowledges that these are difficult things to address, but that their opinion is just as valid. And especially when we're reading, that provides us an opportunity to really explore it, because it's not like a math problem where you have to, have the right answer down to the T. With reading, it is much more of an interpretive process, and everybody interprets stuff slightly differently. Now, when we're working for a standardized test, there is a right or wrong answer, which I hate. Excuse me, but excuse me. But that's when you talk to students about, okay, what is most correct? Because as we saw in that example, what's the most logical reason? There was more than one correct answer in that last question, purposefully so, because both of those things were true, but it was just which one is most logical. So again, encouraging students to see then that often there will be multiple correct answers, and it's okay to voice your opinion. Just be able to support it. Constantly ask for it, ask students for it, but also build a space then where they feel comfortable enough to share it, and that takes time. Are we doing anything else?
That concludes everything that is in the Q&A.
Awesome. Well, thank you
Kara?
guys so much. Yeah, Danielle.
Do you mind putting the webinar slide back up? There was a little glitch for
Oh.
some reason. Some individuals couldn't access it. I think it's fixed now. So if they
Okay.
want to try again while they're still here.
So the survey?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just put that back up for us. Yeah, we'll do that real quick. Because please take the survey. It's very helpful to have that information. There we go. All right. Oop. Now, this one. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Yeah, quick QR code, scan it, fill out the webinar survey. I appreciate it so much. You're all so wonderful. Thank you for coming and participating. And yeah, there's so much more to talk about with this topic. So this was just the beginning. Let's meet during a coaching session.